how do we make AI in the virtual world help us in the real world? And that's essentially what we will be doing.
So today's guest is Mr. Rob Morris, co-CEO for the UK and Ireland at Siemens Mobility. Rob is vastly experienced. He spent over 2 decades delivering and leading major UK infrastructure programs, moving from operational roles into senior leadership roles. We talk about what good leadership looks like in a safety-critical environment like this. And we also discuss how the co-CEO model works. You don't see that very often. How does that work in practice within a global organization like this, which was very insightful. We also turn to the digitalization of the UK rail network. Rob explains the shift from traditional signaling, for instance, to digital systems, and also the growing sophistication of train driving technology and how close the industry really is to fully autonomous operation, which isn't really the case at the moment. Most of them are manned, although the software does a lot. But that may not be the case for too much longer. He also shares why the UK continues to be regarded as a global leader in rail safety as these systems and this technology evolves. We also explore how asset management is changing as rail becomes more increasingly software-driven, with digital systems and data now as critical as the physical railway itself. On why this demands a stronger focus on visibility, control, and governance. Fascinating conversation, really insightful, such an interesting organization. I didn't realize they covered as much as they did. It's a fab conversation. Rob's a great storyteller. It's Rob Morris. Rob, thank you so much for agreeing to do this. I've been really excited by the prospect of talking to you. We've had this lined up for quite a while. The more research I've done on Siemens and yourself, the more sort of excited I've been about chatting to you. There's loads to unpack today. So first of all, I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you, Gareth. I'm really keen to see what the rest of the interview will sort of unravel between us. So let's crack on, shall we?
We always start off with this big question, Rob. Obviously we're a technology and leadership podcast. So what does good leadership mean to you?
That's a cracking question. And I guess, well, the first thing is, I'm absolutely ancient. I've been working now for nearly 50 years. So I guess during my time, I've had lots of opportunity to look at what good leadership looks like. And for me, I guess when I first started, when I was young, I thought it was about knowing all the answers and being able to give all those answers. And actually, how wrong was I? It's about really understanding what the right questions are to ask of those people around you and listening deeply to what they've got to say and empowering them to find the solutions. And I think that is a good sign of good leadership. And, at the end of the day, we're all here to enjoy ourselves. And it's how do we make sure that we do just that in whatever we do.
Absolutely. That's a great answer. Look, I think a lot of what you're talking about there is about being a good listener, Rob, isn't it? Being a good listener, listening to people's point of views and empathizing with their situation, so that you can basically get to the fundamentals of what they're talking about, so that you can provide support for them to achieve their goals. Because if your team are achieving their goals, then you are achieving yours, aren't you? So
absolutely.
So yeah, empathy is at the heart of that. And no, that's a really good answer, Rob. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. So for the listeners who are not very familiar with yourself and also with Siemens Mobility, could you give us a little bit of an introduction, an overview of your career and what your role, what you're doing right now?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a joint CEO of Siemens Mobility. We manufacture trains and rail infrastructure, rail systems solutions. So the whole system around mobility by train and everything that goes with it, all the techie stuff, if you like.
Right.
As I just mentioned, I've been working for something like 50 years now, very close to that. And I've had the good fortune as starting off as an apprentice, then graduating. I've worked in the mining industry, mining research and development, and then building stuff. And then in the building power stations around the world, in the Middle East, in the UK, Scandinavia, Eastern Europe. then coming back to the UK and getting involved with general construction. So what does that mean? That's nuclear decommissioning, some pretty heavy stuff in that. The 2012 Olympics, I was involved with that. Heathrow Terminal 2, airside, building that facility that came underneath me, and running a power and energy business as well before joining Siemens some 11 years ago. And I have to say, I've enjoyed every single working day of my career, although some days more than others.
Well, look, the lessons are in the difficult days, aren't they? You know what
Absolutely.
I mean? It's never plain sailing. So yeah. Can I just take you back to the beginning, the very beginning, but the early part of your career journey? How did you pursue this direction? What got you into engineering, procurement type work?
I didn't set out to be in technology.
So what did you want to be when you grew up then, Rob?
I wanted to be an architect. I'm a son of a plasterer.
Oh, okay.
A son of a plasterer. My grandfather was a plasterer, very working class, but...
bloody hard work trying to find a good plasterer, I tell you that now. You would have had a good career doing that.
Yeah, well, don't come to me. I'm rubbish at it. But they have their own businesses, and because I was into maths, but I was also into art, and I wanted to go into architecture. So that's where I started at the College of Building, actually, but it was during that time I realised that I was more inquisitive from an engineering perspective, and that took me into engineering. So I within the first year or so I shifted into an engineering-based career, and it was from that I took on an apprenticeship in engineering. I joined the mining industry at a mining research and development establishment at that time. And what was really fabulous about that was I graduated during that time, where I got involved with ultrasonic technology, microwave technology, nucleonics, fiber optics, all in a mining environment. And how can you use this technology to really improve productivity, safety, and everything that goes with that? And that really started me off on engineering and technology. And the two have sort of gone hand in hand all the way through my career.
Yeah. You spent quite a long time of your early career, a large part of your earlier career, kind of in operations, technical delivery type work, by the sounds of it. And then you took a foray into leadership, shall we say. I know you were at Balfour Beatty, you became a managing director, a senior director, operations director initially, and then a managing director. Can you talk us through that transition? Why did you move into those senior roles? Why did you go in that direction? And what did you initially think about it in terms of that change and working in more senior leadership roles? Did you take to it like a duck to water, or was it something you needed you had to adapt to for quite a while?
So I think, well, first of all, I'm still adapting now. The world is changing, so I have to adapt now. Every day is a changing day. Every day I have to adapt. I don't think it's something that you do once, twice, or three times. It's continuous. Going back to Balfour Beatty, which I have to say was a decade of, I loved it in Balfour Beatty. Balfour Beatty, marvellous company. We're all like Siemens in a totally different way. And I was actually in Poland at the time. I was building a power station in Poland, Zielona Góra, which was generating electricity for the national grid in Poland, but also providing heat for a city of 100,000. And at that time, there was a unit within Balfour Beatty that was being freshly set up to deal with multidisciplined type projects, not just civil engineering based. And so I was approached, headhunted if you like, whilst I was in Poland, to see if I would be interested in a role here, given that, I'm an electromechanical engineer, but with a broad EPC, engineering, procurement, construction and commissioning background, turnkey, and heavily technology based. How would I be interested in going into there? And
because it's difficult to pull yourself away from the detail and the daily grind of the hands-on work, isn't it? that I would find that difficult, I'm sure.
Yeah, it felt natural to me. I think
Oh,
because
okay.
I'd had quite a few, if you like, points of adversity in my career. One or two notable ones where leadership was actually really. There's no other way through. I was on my own, and somehow I had to deal with it. And so it
Yeah.
feels natural to go from an operational perspective to a leader of people and organizations. And you do that in a project environment anyway, but general management,
Yeah.
I guess, means to a large degree is, I think, letting go of a lot of things, really putting trust
Yeah.
in others and giving them that trust and essentially empowering them to do it, and just offering your guidance, asking those questions that I talked about earlier, and empowering them to come up with the solutions. So I got involved with some marvelous things whilst I was with Balfour Beatty.
I can imagine.
And the really good thing there was really around efficiency and cost control, because civil engineering businesses, large construction contractors, they work on very, very tiny margins, got big programs, and with big risks. And so to be able to manage people, manage programs, manage costs and risks, it's about getting the best out of people, but where you can use technology to do that too.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously a very successful spell at Balfour Beatty, one of the UK's top construction companies. But then you obviously had this opportunity to come up with Siemens Rail. Had you done much in rail before joining Siemens in 2015, or was that new territory for you?
So I think it's fair to say I'd flirted with rail during my career a few times. In
Yeah,
mining, to move coal around the country involved
of course.
trains and the roads and that. And so when I was in my early 20s, I was actively involved in something called automatic vehicle identification. So that's monitoring trains around the country using technology and the weight of coal on that trains. So there was
Yeah,
a bit of a flirt there with it, and building infrastructure for rapid rail outloading of coal. So I got involved with that as well.
yeah,
Early on with Balfour Beatty, I was involved with one of the projects I was overseeing was the overhead line electrification of the West Coast Main Line. But with Siemens, I think what really got me excited was the role I've got is around overseeing research and development,
yeah,
which my past is anchored in that. It's around product design, manufacturing. I've been responsible for 5 or 6 factories before in past lives. So again, that came together. All systems architecture around rail systems and all of that, getting involved with that. We're also putting things into play on the infrastructure in terms of civils, the mechanical installation, electrical works, and all the automation and commissioning that's required to put systems into place, and the interplay with trains and large programs which are basically funded by the government and the taxpayer and have a political element to them. So all of those component parts were, key to the final seduction into the
yeah.
rail industry with Siemens from that initial flirting in the early
Yeah,
days, if I may use such
absolutely.
language.
Yeah, and you haven't looked back since, I don't suppose. So,
Oh,
so
absolutely. Love it.
So can I ask you about your most recent role then? So what stood out for me is you don't see too many co-CEOs around, and your job title implies that you've obviously got more than one remit, shall we say, to look after a different unit of Siemens as well. Talk us through, what is the purpose of your role, Rob? What is your roles? What is the main the reason, the raison d'être of your position at Siemens?
So I'm, as you quite rightly say, a co-CEO. So Siemens Mobility here in the UK and Ireland, we're a large company and we've got 4 business units. So we've got rail infrastructure, which includes train command and control, so signaling, traffic management systems, conflict resolution systems, and we'll go into that if you like a bit later. All the software that's required to improve the flow of railway and traffic movement, passenger movement, and all of that. So that's 2 business units, which I'm responsible for. I've got a colleague, co-CEO, Glai Schneider, recently joined in that role, and she's responsible for rolling stock and rolling stock maintenance. So probably around a quarter of the rolling stock or the trains here in the UK are actually Siemens technology, and we've maintained that, so we make sure that they operate regularly and reliably on the network. And so each night and weekends there for maintenance. And so Aglaia looks after those 2 businesses, rolling stock and it's called customer services. But together, we're jointly and severally responsible for Siemens Mobility here in the UK and Ireland, manufacturing trains and control systems and rail systems here in the UK for the UK, using our 5,000 or so people and the ingenuity they bring to engineer and put all these into being. We operate out of some 30 locations around the country, both in terms of manufacturing, depots and offices, from Southampton on the south coast up to Glasgow in Scotland and across the breadth of the country as well. And we use something like 2,100 plus suppliers here in the UK, predominantly here in the UK, to help us do that. And my responsibility, and Aglaia's too, for Earthstreams, is to make sure that we are a viable, sustainable company, that we do the right thing by the travelling public and our clients and the freight users as well, by providing top-class technology and systems that, improve the now and ultimately improve the future. And we're investing heavily in doing that. So we've just spent 200 million or so up in Goole for a new rail manufacturing facility, and we're currently building Piccadilly line trains out of there. We're also building about 40 million bogie service centre out there so that we can maintain the bogie sets on those trains and around the country appropriately. Also another 100 million in a brand new R&D facility and manufacturing facility in Chippenham. So collectively, that's 340 million. So we're very much invested in the future. And my job is to make sure that we do our very best as essentially a caretaker for the business, for the sector.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Siemens seems to be at the center of the sort of digitalization of the UK rail network. And one thing that stood out for me on that, and I'm sure a lot of people will sort of empathize with this. We've all been on, in a train station, enduring some long delay because of signaling issues.
Yeah.
I know you guys are helping move from traditional signaling to sort of digital train controls of sorts. So in simple terms, why is the shift from trackside signals to sort of in-cabin digital systems such a sort of big deal in the rail sector right now? And what are you guys doing to help that shift accelerate?
That shift to digital signaling is a must, really. And first of all, trackside signals, lights on sticks, if you like, actually limit the capacity on the existing railway. They're also not a very sustainable way of controlling the railway. There's a lot of intervention on the infrastructure that's required, and that access is both costly and not very productive, because everything has to be done quite rightly in a safe manner during times of when the railway is not operating, and that's quite narrow windows to do that. What digital signalling does, and it's called European Train Control System technology, is it actually brings those signals into the cab. So it's digital essentially on the screen. And that information is instantaneous. It allows trains to operate a lot closer together because the brains know the acceleration and the braking times for these trains. It gives instant information to the driver so he can drive at maximum performance, and that could be speed, more ideally from a sustainable perspective, so the most economical way of doing that, and also how to control speed to meet the requirements of the timetable. And that's something else that we do. We do our interlockings. Our interlockings are what protect trains from stopping going into an area where there's already a train. We've got a control system which allows that to happen smoothly. But inevitably, there's delays from time to time. You touched on those delays. And what we now provide is something called digital conflict resolution. It's a new system. And what it does is it looks at the performance of the railway compared to the timetables and looks and provides options to the signaller to say, well, how can you reduce that delay by changing the way in which things happen on the railway? And these things ordinarily wouldn't be visible because the railway is so complex. It is amazingly complex.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And now it takes time for these
sense.
things to roll out. And of course, at the end of the day, it's around balancing funding against ambition and, of course, economical constraints, of which the government, for example, has got quite a lot of them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Just out of curiosity, how does the UK compare in terms of rail infrastructure on the global stage, Rob? I know you've worked all over the world, and I've been on trains. I was in Italy a couple of years ago, and I was very impressed that the high-speed trains going from Venice to Bologna were fantastic, and I know they got other good services there. And the UK is improving for sure. But how does the UK stack up compared to the leaders in rail infrastructure like Japan, Germany, Italy potentially, and others?
Well, the first thing is the railway needs to be safe. And the UK railway is the safest in the world. So
really? Okay.
It is, yeah. So that's a good thing. So let's tick that box when comparing across the rest of the world. The second thing is, it's a largely Victorian railway. We've been the first at so many things, and that because of the Industrial Revolution. And
the two being one of them, of course.
That's right. And so by being the first players and building on that, we've got a fabulous, highly dense railway. But with that, it's a railway that demands a lot of renewal, just as it is, to stop it from falling over. So that's highly costly. And then to get enhancements on top of that, that is perhaps where some of our challenges are as a country, because we're having to maintain and build on something that's really very old. Now, if we would comparing around the world to say, well, which part of the UK infrastructure is a real high performer, truly world class, then the Elizabeth line has to stand out there. It's surpassed all expectations.
Yeah.
And bearing in mind, this is something that was based on, it's specified the best part of 2 decades ago now. We really have got something there that as a nation we can shout about. And the good thing from our perspective is, in the central sections of the Elizabeth line, we provided the communication-based train control systems there. So the trains are managed by our systems. Our customer information systems are there. So all the platform screen doors, all the wayfinding, all of that is provided by Siemens technology. All the movement of escalators, the environment that people feel, people see, sense, touch to move around efficiently, that's all driven by Siemens technology. So, from my perspective and from a business perspective, we are very proud to be part of, the highest performing railway in the UK, and one that stands really high and proud globally.
I mean, it's an incredible achievement, isn't it? I mean, the Elizabeth. I mean, I was watching a documentary about it not long after it opened, about the sort of engineering challenge of getting it to not ruin a show when you're sitting in the Barbican with a train going past. So they had to put it on like suspension with shock absorbers to absorb the noise. So when it goes under the Barbican Theatre, it goes on like a different suspension track, if you like.
Yep.
So it absorbs all the noise. So it keeps quiet when it's going under. I thought it was incredible. But there was loads of little like bits like that, you know, sort of troubleshooting these engineering challenges as you go along type thing. It was an amazing, and the technology on it is fab as well. And I did have a question for you about that. But what is your proudest achievement in terms of the technical integration of that Crossrail project, Rob? And how does it sort of shape how you approach major UK rail programs going forward? What did you learn from that piece of work?
With adversity comes opportunity. With grit and determination, you'll hit success. There was lots of problems with the Elizabeth line during its build, and around budget and all those sorts of things. COVID came along, which further exacerbated the problem. But at the end of the day, we've created something through grit and determination and very clear thinking in the end, by us all leaning in together, multiple companies leaning in together to really operate to the best of our technology, the best of our people or whatever, to come up with something that's absolutely fabulous. The same will happen with High Speed 2, but it doesn't feel that way at the moment.
Eventually, maybe. Yeah, that's been dragging over a while, isn't it? But was there a specific, like, sort of technology you invented for that project, or you had to customize or something? Was there any products that came out of it for you guys?
So, there's lots of things we did. I think the most impressive thing that we did there was, because of the signalling system across the south and through London, we've got multiple systems provided by multiple suppliers.
Yeah.
We've got something called TPWS, which is an old type of train protection system, and that was predominantly on the east. And on the west, a similar system, or moving into European Train Control System, and likewise to Heathrow. And we got a metro system in the middle bit, which was communication-based train control system. Sorry with all the different technologies. But for us to integrate all those systems together so that we got seamless operation between what's essentially Network Rail's mainline systems on the east and the west, and through the core, our system, the metro systems, to get that free-flowing movement, really open up London, both to the rest of the country, but also attract housing and all of those. It really taught me how technology, the employment of technology, the great integration of that by novel means, can really have social and economic benefits. It's really improved the productivity of London as a consequence.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you tell me a little bit about the East Coast Digital Programme and your involvement in that? As I understand, there's quite a lot came out of that, which potentially could tell us how the future, that all the next 10 years look in terms of the rail sector in the UK. Can you tell us a little bit about that whole programme?
Yeah. So, first of all, the East Coast Main Line is really important to the UK economy. So 30% of the nation is within 20 minutes of the East Coast Main Line, if I recall that correctly. And so it really is a rich vein for opening up productivity along the East Coast. And a few years ago now, we had a great opportunity. We won the framework to essentially renew the signalling up the East Coast. We've opened up Northern City Line now. That's operating on ETCS, so the trains and the infrastructure are talking to each other, and we are gradually moving up the East Coast to improve that technology and to, make rail journeys much more reliable, improve capacity, and keep both passenger and a driver more informed. And ultimately, that will create a much more sustainable railway because we are operating in a much more efficient way. But just on that, it's not just about signalling, it's probably move away from East Coast, if I could use that as a segue. The future for me is around the whole system. And as a manufacturer of trains and the infrastructure, and with rail reform as it's going with the soon to form Great British Railways, we can look at the whole system. How we use digitalization and electrification in the right way. So moving totally away from diesel, carbon fuels, we can have battery bimode technology. So that's trains that will operate either under electrified lines or on their own without electrified lines through battery power. But also we've got something called a rail charger converter that can charge trains dynamically, so it'll pass them. And what this does is it gives us an opportunity in the future to have trains that are net zero, that actually save something like 12, we've modeled 7 routes, can save something like 12 million tons of carbon through the life of those trains. And at the same time, it's considerably cheaper. Something like 3.5 billion is what we've modeled. So for me, digitalization, new technology, looking at things in a whole system perspective really opens up for a cleaner, if you like, a cheaper way of traveling in the future. It has to be the right thing for the passenger and the freight user and, of course, the taxpayer.
Absolutely. I suppose the digitalization, we were talking about asset management earlier on, because it's such a critical part of running a rail organization or a network is obviously tracking and managing your physical assets. With digitalization, are you seeing an increase, like maybe a reduction in the physical asset inventory, moving over to a digital asset inventory, which then potentially will create more efficiencies? Is that the journey you're sort of on with increasing digitalization?
Absolutely, yes. We've got, for example, our Desiro trains, which operate actually on the East Coast as well, and in London. They carry something like 9 million data points on the health of the train. They also can look at the infrastructure and the health of the track and vibrations on that. But as an example of what you just said, those 9 million data points contribute to it scheduling its own preventative maintenance. So 30% of its preventative maintenance is scheduled by the train itself. So, and I can only see that building in the future. We use a platform called Rail Agent, where we're feeding it in all of this data and looking at new ways of really gleaning information from it to make the railway and its assets perform more efficiently in the future. And there'll be more and more of that.
Because with increased digitalization, and this is a great segue into something you knew I was going to ask you about, which is the increasing use of artificial intelligence technology to improve efficiency, to potentially help train drivers, maybe drive trains here and there. How do you see AI manifesting in your organization over the next couple of years?
Well, it will grow at a rapid rate, without a doubt.
Is that already happening, Rob?
It is. We're still finding our way. And if I could perhaps actually go back a little bit. So our global CEO, Dr. Roland Bush, he made a point at a recent business conference in Siemens, and he said, AI is once in a century event. The last once in a century event was electricity. There was life before electricity and life after electricity. And actually, Siemens built a sustainable business based on that transformation. AI is the same. There'll be life before AI and life after AI. And from our perspective, it's around how do we make AI in the virtual world help us in the real world? And that's essentially what we will be doing. And incidentally, the very first artificial intelligence printed circuit board that we did in Siemens was actually back in the 90s. So it's been around for a while. But this pickup, you quite rightly say, is significant. So the way in which we operate as a business, our day-to-day activities are increasingly using AI, but with the appropriate guardrails to make sure that we do that. More critically, and I'll emphasize critically, we are a safety critical business. So what we cannot do is rely on artificial intelligence to deal with some of those things where we have to be 100% sure of the veracity and integrity of what we engineer. So it's how do we get artificial intelligence and realities of safety criticality married perfectly together. That's what we're working on now. And for sure, AI will improve productivity for everybody, not just Siemens, for everybody.
I know you guys obviously create software to actually drive trains as well. So I'm assuming that is controlled by a human in a control room. And how is there a shift across to that being completely driven by artificial intelligence, or is that already happening?
So artificial intelligence will not, you wouldn't want at this stage artificial intelligence driving trains. There is different stages of supervision where trains could be run with the software that they've got in a totally automated way. DLR is a good example of that.
DLR in London, the light railway in London.
That's fully automated, but it's not artificial intelligence, right? What we do have, I mentioned earlier digital conflict resolution, which is a system which looks over the railway, looks over the timetable, and it uses algorithms which have got the intelligence to understand when things are going wrong and how to put them right?
Right, okay.
That's a different type of this. It's a very fine line, but it is one safety critical. At this stage, we wouldn't want artificial intelligence automatically operating a railway. We're not there yet.
Yeah. No, of course. But the data you're accruing with your current systems is inevitably going to help train potential AI in the future to do this safely. Because ultimately, I think AI is going in a direction where it probably is going to be more safe than humans eventually in these type of endeavors, surely.
Well, I think where we are with it is, there's a human at the start of the process to say, this is the problem statement, this is what we want you to do as AI. And at the end of it, there has to be a human that says, is this correct? And that's how we're operating at the moment, in whichever way we apply AI. And it remains to be seen really how far it goes. I have to say I'd call to arms in the business about some other things. And what I said to the team was, if you can imagine what the world will be like in 100 years from a technology perspective, then actually that will happen in the next 10 years. The reason being is we're changing at such a rate, it will get there much quicker. Rail industry is slightly slower, to be honest, but that's where I think
But it's because it's so safety conscious, isn't it? You know what I mean? You have to put that the cart, you can't put the cart before the horse, can you? You know what I mean? It has to be led by the safety standards, doesn't it? So,
absolutely. So if we're not safe, we haven't got a business.
Of course, absolutely. Rob, I wanted to ask you, so just in terms of technology innovation, then let's maybe run with that. We've talked about a couple of amazing product development over the last 10 years at Siemens, and I'm sure there's more to come in the future. What are you most excited about? It doesn't have to be AI, it can be anything. What technology innovation are you most excited about in your sector right now?
I think it's that old system thinking. So it's not one technology, it's bringing it all together, getting to a situation where you can simulate everything. Now, I've just talked about train command and control at one route. I've talked about the energy and how do you make it most efficient from a decarbonisation perspective. So a train running on various routes, reducing the cost, reducing the carbon, all of that sort of thing. But the reality of it is the rail system operates in a much bigger system. Energy input from various places. We've got a situation where there's greater demands on energy. So data centers, the change in the environment, air conditioning and all that requires more and more energy. And we as Siemens, as a one tech company, have the ability to look at these subsystems, systems, all systems and super systems and model it all virtually with AI and actually look at the interventions that are required to really optimize that, rather than, as we tend to do across the world here and here in the UK, is patch and mend little bits. And eventually, by just doing patch and mend, you actually end up with something that's totally different, costs a lot more, and is operating on a much higher cost base than it needs to do. So for me, there's technology can really change things from a big macro perspective as well as much smaller perspective.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we always ask guests this question now. So I know you've got a long way to go, Rob, in your career, I'm sure. But looking back now...
I hope so.
Looking back now, over the course of your very illustrious career, what advice would you give to your 21-year-old self, Rob?
Don't overthink things. Do more of the curiosity stuff. I was always very curious, but do more of it and ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help, because people love giving help and feeling valued for it.
Fab. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing how many people don't do that because they think they're going to look stupid if they ask a good, a stupid question or something. And it's like analysis paralysis, isn't it? It kind of restricts them, when sort of childlike curiosity is sometimes the best thing you can do. And finally, then, Rob, we always ask the guests for a book recommendation. And if you're not much of a reader, it can be a documentary or some other piece of content you've consumed recently, which has inspired you.
Right. So often whenever I hear this question to others, it's some book from Harvard or wherever that people say. For me, it's actually the guy's called Ross Edgley, Xass.
Oh, God. Is he the guy who swum around the UK?
And that's exactly the book. The book is called The Art of Resilience.
I've not read it, but I heard about that. I was like, what is he doing?
Yeah, and if I remember rightly, it was 157 days or something, 160 days, something like that.
Yeah.
Swimming 12 hours a day, staying on a boat when he was not swimming, but, he did it continuous. And what he faced around that was analogous to the adversity people have in their lives, I think.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
And what he did was, before he went round, he did a number of things to look at how he was in peak performance, both in terms of mind and body, but overall resilience. And,
God, yeah.
And how we use that to tackle these various elements of adversity. So that grit, determination, and ultimate vision, for me, I thought that's all about leadership. It's all about doing the right thing by you and trusting the team around him, because he obviously had a team around him. So for me, just offer another book, which I read last year, which is more affirmative than learning something from it, where I did use Copilot, because I'm interested in quantum mechanics, quantum entanglement and all that sort of thing.
Oh, wow, okay.
Consciousness and spirituality. And so I put that in Copilot and said, give me a book that will really interest me. And what came out was a book from Dr. Joe Dispenza called Becoming Supernatural. And again, it's brilliant. It's a bit of a heavy read at times, but it's really, really good.
So does he try to break down what consciousness actually is at a fundamental level? Because we don't fully understand what consciousness is, really, do we? But is it that what he's talking about from a physical standpoint?
Yeah, and it is. And, he's got loads of examples in there. One is an individual who suddenly lost her husband through suicide and then became terminally ill herself. And how she used her mind to come out of that. And so, that's really powerful stuff. But then he relates to, I will say something now, which I don't think's in the book.
Yeah, go
but
for it.
It reinforces my thinking throughout my life that I've gradually sort of come to. And that is, the quality of your thinking determines the quality of your life.
Absolutely.
And what I think the book says is, if you have good quality of thinking, it has a great impact on the quality of your emotions, and the quality of your emotions determine the quality of your health. And you've always got the power to change. And then what it does is it brings in some of the, let's call it wacky stuff, but I think there's more and more reality around quantum mechanics and how you look at things on a very micro level, but also on a macro level from a universe perspective, and actually touches on technology as well. So it's a diverse book, but really interesting, powerful stuff.
Funnily enough, Rob, we interviewed the UK chairwoman of IBM, a lady called Nicola Hodgson. She's fantastic. And she also recommended the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza.
All right.
I don't know if I said that right. And pointed me in the direction of his YouTube channel. So you're not the first one to have recommended content from that individual. But we will put that on the show notes, especially that book. Thank you so much for sharing that. I read a lot of Stoic philosophy, and not a lot. I do read a quote every day on my app on my phone. And I read the book by Marcus Aurelius called Meditations, which I would absolutely recommend. But what you said reminded me of a quote from Marcus Aurelius, which is, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." Now think about that, which I thought it sums up what you're talking about perfectly. And that's a great way to end. A Marcus Aurelius quote to close the show. Rob, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed talking to you. It's been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for coming on the Tech Leaders podcast.
And likewise, Gareth, thank you for having me.
Wow, I love that. Rob's a great conversation, great storyteller. That was fab. There was loads of things I could reflect on here, but I think what really stood out for me, maybe this is just me, I don't know, but I really loved Rob talking about Crossrail, now the Elizabeth line, of course, and what it represents for UK rail. It really was an engineering triumph, and Siemens were heavily involved in certainly the digital element of it. It's one of the most complex urban rail projects ever delivered, combining metro-style frequency with the demands of a national rail network. Making that work required new approaches to signaling control and systems integration, all delivered safely in a live, high-pressure environment. So I thought that was so insightful. Obviously, Siemens played a pivotal role, delivering key elements of the signaling, control, and communication systems that allowed the railway to operate at scale, I suppose. I thought that was just so insightful. So many lessons from that as well, which now underpin the UK's move towards digital rail and how that will continue to shape how the next generation of infrastructure programs are being delivered, not just within the rail sector, but beyond. Yeah, I thought it was a fascinating conversation. Rob's, like I said, he was a great guest. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you really enjoyed the episode. Please don't forget, give us a like, give us a subscribe, tell your friends about it, anything that's going to push this out there and allow us to bring you more great guests like Rob in the future. Thank you for listening to the Tech Leaders podcast. This episode was brought to you by Be Digital. Be Digital support leadership teams to optimize cost and get more out of technology investments. Be Digital and the team have unrivaled expertise with technology license management and data remediation, and are therefore perfectly positioned to help prepare organizations for AI technology capability. And on the last point, Be Digital have developed a cutting-edge AI readiness assessment, which provides tech leaders with a platform they need to make well-informed decisions about AI adoption strategy in 2024 and beyond. Go to Be Digital UK to find out more and get in touch.